All righty, everybody. Good morning. Hope everyone's doing well this morning. We've pushed this show off because I messed up our time zones last time and kind of pooped the bed on that. So luckily enough, Mr. Mo has been gracious enough with his time to join us again. And this is actually his second visit with us. He did about 2.5 hours covering his extensive career in the military, 37 years from infantry. He's got signals and intelligence experience, but also he was with the Mike Force. He was with SOG, Project Omega, running Recon. So he is variable. He's a jack of all trades, so to speak. So we're going to have him here talking about more or less questions will come up about, I'm sure, about his career, but he's going to be speaking with us today about his entrance into the unit, aka Delta Force, and we're going to be covering some stuff from his time in the unit. So, Mr. Mo, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours, sir.
Well, okay, about the entry into the force, I was at Fort Monroe at Training and Doctrine Command, and I worked at the time I was in research and development, combat developments. My job was an operations test officer for airborne, diving, special operations, and all the other stuff nobody wanted to bother with. And for some reason, I got included into a briefing. General Depew was there at the time, and Colonel Beckwith shows up, and he talks about this idea for a new organization. And it was interesting to me because I'd actually written a paper once when I was at Fort Devens in the 10th Group about a specialized activity and elements that would be able to respond to specific kinds of operations. I was kind of infatuated with the idea. So later on, I found out that this organization did come into being as he'd gone up the line, and he got blessings all the way up, to General Meyer at the Pentagon, et cetera. And then, although I knew that I could see that he was also getting a lot of flack, people not want to see another specialized organization. But anyway, I found out later on that they were becoming a unit, and there was a selection process. And so I went around and I made an application. I went down and I had an interview with Colonel Beckwith, and later on, I was accepted to go and try for selection and assessment. And I got down there and I got hurt. And he said, okay, you can hang out here and be the support boss until you heal up and try again. So then I went ahead, and during all this time, Eagle Claw was forming up and conducting and everything else. And later on, I got up to West Virginia, went through selection and made it, and became a member of the unit. That's kind of the entry there. But it's funny to be the guy in support because you learn so many things that you would never have looked at as being an operator. And so it gave me I would say, a wider, deeper appreciation for what it takes to make something like that organization go. One of the things that I'll mention now is that unit would never have been able to be organized, equipped, and become operational because it needed so much focus from the operators. And they had recruited some of the most incredible support people I've ever seen in the military. Personnel, finance, logistics, you name it. And all those people worked incredible hours and with no complaints to make it so easy for the operators to focus on the operations and not be tied down with minutia that you often find in other organizations.
And I will have a question about that coming up. The support personnel and the outset of the organization. But your first meeting with Mr. Beckwith, did you happen to know him from Vietnam? Had you ever crossed paths with Charlie before?
I knew of him, but I'd never crossed paths with him. No.
So this was your first meeting, and this was the meeting to see if you'd pass his initial test to even be considered. Well, what did y'all? Was he asking you about your military experience? Was it straight to the point?
It's really hard to answer that. I can't really remember it that well. I know I made a mistake because normally I would go to meetings wearing just my uniform, and I'd have my wings and my Ranger tab at that time. But you go in these meetings, and all these guys didn't know me because I'd never been in I'd never been a Fort Bragg denizen. I wasn't part of the inner crew of special forces. I'd always been in special projects and back and forth. And so I put together what I call my credibility shirt. And I put all these badges, patches that you have, you know, Airborne, CIB, Vietnamese Ranger badge, and all that crap. And I wore that shirt, and he wasn't happy with that. He thought I was trying to be a hoorah guy, and that's just wasn't me. So we had a little bit off on the wrong foot to start with. But, you know, it was a face-to-face challenge. And, of course, the deputy, Colonel Potter, I'd known him at Fort Monroe because his son and my son played soccer together, and he was at TRADOC at the same time, and he knew me, and he thought, I guess, pretty highly of me. So I had him in my corner, and that's how it worked out. It just yeah, okay, come on in, and if you can meet the standard, you're welcome, and that's kind of what happened.
Wow, that's really neat how and at the early days like that, you literally are meeting the guy, laying the groundwork, and he's sniffing you out to see if he wants to even give you a chance to come try out for the group, so to speak. That's really cool.
Well, it was kind of interesting because I knew Logan Fitch from Vietnam. We were in the same battalion in the 173rd. He had D Company when I was the intel officer. In fact, I was involved when he got wounded, getting him evacuated, but you can't remember it. And I knew Bucky Burroughs, but not well. But we were in the Mike Force after I got commissioned. I got sent over to the Trang Mike Force, and he deployed most of the time I was there, but we did know each other face to face. So I knew some of the officers already there.
Wow. And here's a picture of Mr. Bucky. He's definitely looks good in his uniform still.
Yeah, Buckshot's okay. He's a good guy. He knows his stuff. He's a hell of a good American, and he carries the ribbons well.
Absolutely. I was very surprised to see he and I can't remember if it was Mr. Dick Potter, who Mr. Wade spoke very highly of yesterday, but them two getting the guys ready for Eagle Claw, and Bucky leading, I believe, singing God Bless America. Yeah. Amazing.
It's kind of a bad move. I made a bad decision. I had a recorder with me, a tape recorder, when they were getting ready to leave and get on the aircraft to fly away. And I started to record the ceremony, not a ceremony, but the get together and the talk by General Vaught. And then I thought to myself, no, because later on someone will point a finger at me saying, you're trying to profit or do something from this or make a name or whatever. And I didn't. And I was a missed opportunity that I really regret today, not having that.
I can only imagine what that moment must have been like, all you guys getting ready and the feelings. And it seems like reading what he described it like was the hair standing up on the back of your neck kind of situation.
Well, that's me there. That's me there. And there's Dick Potter on the far left, and Bucky, you got the there on. That's Potter, Bucky. God, I can't think of that kid, the next kid's name. The back of his head there is a Super Jew.
Larry Friedman. Yep.
Yeah, Larry Friedman. And I can't remember the guy with the black hat in the middle there. I can't remember his name now, but he was one of those physical guys. He could just run and leap and call buildings and stuff.
was that Mr. Fred Lewis right here?
Yes, that's him.
Okay.
That's Fred Lewis. Yeah.
Yes. He Mr. Wade writes and speaks very highly of him. He's I mean, all of the guys sound outstanding, but Mr. Fred sounded like he was a really good guy. I'm not sure if he's alive or not. I don't mean to sound like he's passed away if he has.
Well, he's a lot younger than me, so he's probably still there around.
Amazing. Guys, again, not to give a shameless plug, but we're talking Delta Force here, and he was in the beginning as well, Mr. Wade. He really breaks it down, talking about how, and speaking to Mr. Mike Vining, he explained this, and I believe you did as well, how on the outset you had specialty groups, the armors coming in could do everything. We'll have a question about that coming up, but you had which I had never heard about, and already having this formed back then, and I can only imagine the security that goes around with unit members today. But having you guys placed in, I can't think of the name, but it's a specialty black ops book, if you will, to try and keep y'all's names, your identities, your families protected, to where your names don't pop up on any.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the, when you mentioned it, I had the name in my head. Now it's escaped again. It was a special roster, and it was an offline roster, and everybody in the organization was carried on that roster. So they weren't, you wouldn't pop up on anything normal within the system.
I wish I could
really,
find it.
I cannot remember the name of that roster now.
I was literally just looking at it for this reason, and can't find it to save my life. But along with that, you've got to make sure everybody that comes. Most people think it's only can be special forces men that try out for Delta, and that's not the case. Y'all set out a wide array of searches. You have people specialty looking for people in the military. Mr. Mike Vining, non-SF, one of the first EOD members, comes in this way.
Well, I'm sure they recognized there were some skill sets that we weren't going to have out of the special operations community, unless you just happen to have a lucky match. So the recruitment initially, from what I saw, went out Army wide with from what I remember, you couldn't get anybody, you couldn't recruit from the White House communications group, and you couldn't get anybody from recruiting command. There may have been some others they couldn't talk to or recruit from, but otherwise it was branch immaterial. The initial groups were primarily from Ranger Special Forces, but we had guys from every branch or skill level you could look at. So we brought in a lot of people with other skills that you wouldn't find in some units.
Were the initial group, not necessarily the first, but that initial group of you guys were, you mentioned every branch. Did y'all have some Marines come try out? And
no, that came later. And I think I know they've been some exchanges, but that was after my time. Mm-hmm. We cooperated with the Navy. We had a mutual relationship with them, but we didn't have much with the Marines that I knew of. And then later on, I remember one of the operator training courses, the top guy came out of it was a Marine. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some Marines there as some kind of an exchange system.
Wow. That's one thing about Delta that's very interesting. Y'all accept, well, don't accept, you've got to pass, of course, but anybody and everybody, that's just getting the cream of the crop. Yeah. It's as a matter of fact, here recently I was reading about or listened to a podcast where a SEAL Team 6 DevGru veteran stopped with DevGru, changed services, and went and tried out for Delta, and ended up becoming one heck of a Delta operator.
Master Sergeant, I think his name is Holland, was the guy we're talking of, and I never met him.
Kevin,
but he did that after leaving the Navy and coming into the Army. The other thing, though, with the Marines, like I said, the niceties of all the details, I have no clue, because it's all happened way past my sell-by date, so I don't know any of the details on that.
Now, and after reading the book, I got very interested. But the first group or the initial grouping, such as yourselves, Mr. Wade had mentioned in the book that Mr. Beckwith Charlie was set on using match grade Colt 1911s, and I believe I've got a photo of one. And you guys actually had the SAS, a man codenamed Ginger. I can't remember his real name. I've gotten it. Better I not share it anyways. But what was that like at the very beginning, getting weapons, you guys procuring ammo as much as you were shooting, and learning how Delta was going to write the book on shooting and CQB and such as that?
Well, a lot of the questions you're asking are not, I'm not a detail man on that, because I was still in the support side. I do know that Ginger was over there, and then they were training with the double tap activity and approaches and some of the other things. Our armors were upgrading 45s because the command was dedicated to the 45. 1911 as your basic sidearm. We were one of the units that applied the sidearm pistol as an assault weapon as opposed to having to go to submachine guns and rifles. And but these were all upgraded, and you'd have the different sights, and they would do the beveled magazine entry, you know, and then they put the hammer down and all the other things, and ambidextrous safety, and a few other things that were done into that. I wouldn't call them match pistols because you have to also depend on reliability. And when you get too refined and your precision, you tend to lose some of your reliability. They're just too easy for them to bind up a little bit. But our 45s were upgraded, refined, and maintained at a high degree. And Ron Wananon was a primary armorer. And then you got Dave Zavitz and a couple other guys whose names that escape me now that came in there. Dave was mostly on the long guns, but they were very skilled and dedicated. And well, of course, Wananon we called Grumpy because he had the personality of a gorilla with hemorrhoids. But other than that, he did his job, and he liked to bitch a lot, but he was really, really good at what he did.
That's Grumpy. I like that.
Yeah, there's a guy now, I think, that they call him Grumpy, but he'd have to work hard to match it.
That's great. Did Mr. Mike mentioned when we had him on that Mr. Charlie was also gung ho on using the grease gun. I guess I don't know if y'all got them from WW2 surplus, Korea surplus, but there for a while it seems like y'all were using the grease gun exclusively.
Well, we started out with 45, and part of the commonality of ammunition between the handgun and the submachine gun is a benefit if you can do that. In fact, we were using so much ammunition, and I was told we had consumed the entire Army's allocation for the year in a very few months. And so we had to go into and get a special dispensation to purchase more ammunition. Yeah, we shot a lot, but the biggest thing was to shoot with quality, not just shoot for quantity. Because if you practice wrong, all you do is imprint yourself with bad muscle memory and responses and reactions. But going to the M3 grease gun, yeah, they were there initially. And in OTC, I trained with a grease gun, and I can tell you that it's not a bad weapon for close quarter battle. It's short, compact, solid, well balanced. Magazine is heavy, 45 ammo, but you can put rounds on target very, very quickly and very well, and it's got a slow rate of fire, and it's very controllable. But then later on, we got the MP5, which in my personal experience was the Rolls Royce of submachine guns. And we converted over to that, which is a 9mm. So you had a ammunition disparity, but you had what I considered a superior submachine gun. But the M3 grease gun, you could drive tent stakes. That sucker was so well built and solid that it was pretty hard to damage one, and it was reliable. Yeah, there's George Schultz.
Yeah, those MP5s always look good on the 90s and 80s era Delta guys. That's I believe that's Mr. Mark's photo he sent me.
When we first got the MP5s, they came with the straight stick magazine, and we were having a lot of failures to feed. And H&K sent an armorer over to stake our magazine wells so they would work in those firearms. But they also sent us a pallet load of the curved magazines, which eliminated the feeding problem.
Wow, a pallet load like that, and for H&K to actually send one of their armors, that's
well, just think of it. You don't want to have outfitted a more or less top line unit with firearms that end up not being acceptable. So it's in there, that led to more and more. The FBI picked up on it, other organizations picked up on it, and then they started producing them. I know when I was with the sheriff's department in Albuquerque, we had some MP5s and 40 caliber Smith & Wesson. And I know there are a few made that were in 45 caliber, but I never had a chance to handle one.
Wow. That and did you there's actually going to be a question about another choice of weapon, but did you when you ended up getting the MP5, did you think there for a while that was good to go for y'all, or did you ever hope, or did you ever wish that y'all had, say, maybe the Car 15 from Vietnam or whatever, shortened
Well,
up?
you've got to look at the mission you're performing, and you say Car 15 from Vietnam. I don't know if you ever saw the picture. I've got a picture. I took the uppers from a Car 15 and put it on top of a lower from an M16. To me, that was a better balance and a little slower rate of fire, and I liked it, and I could control it better. Well, that's just a regular M16 there.
Oh, dang, I don't have that photo.
No.
I thought that was your
I'll send it to you later. That was when I was in Project Delta.
Roger that. It's a great photo.
But no, the thing is that the Car 15 is good, but you've got a lot more penetration when you're going in there and you're trying to do like a hostage rescue. You don't want to be going through 2 or 3 walls with that high-speed round. And again, the whole MP5 family, the K model, which is short and you can carry in a briefcase with a 15-round magazine, stuff like that. It gives you a lot of flexibility. But the biggest thing was with the closed bolt, you could have inherent accuracy out to 100, 125, 30 meters, single shot. And it just worked out well. It was and I think we were ready to get into the modern age a little bit with the MP5s. I know in the job we had, I would have preferred it, but in many, depending on your mission, you have to select the weapon to meet the mission. So there, an M16 or an M4 type weapon with a collapsible stock, etc., it might be fine. Just up to the mission profile you're trying to fit.
Perfect. That's that perfect answer. That's exactly what I was looking for. I was wondering about that too. Why did the 1911 get chosen with the unit instead of maybe everybody using high powers or something different back then?
I think it was based on the 45 caliber, which people had a lot of confidence in it. It's a relatively slow bullet when you talk about even handguns, but it's got it gives you adequate penetration without over penetration. It's fairly controllable. It's accurate enough for the job you're doing because you're not shooting paper targets. You're shooting an opposition. You're shooting a threat, and that can be a movable threat, all the rest of that. So, accuracy is great, but hitting it and putting it down is more important.
Wow. And
I got nothing against the high power. In fact, that picture you showed, I was carrying a high power. Yeah, I was carrying that I used a tanker's shoulder holster as a hip holster in that picture.
That's great. I know there's several of you guys that actually used y'all's Brownings on missions, and some guys just had it back for a base gun or what have you. But that was a great question. I was curious about that as well, Josh. There was gosh, let me ask one of these questions because that we ended up saving, because some of them might actually lead to some better stuff here as I'm floundering. Wow, this is a bit of a long one, but a good one. This is from Thomas True K Actual on Twitter X. What's your best advice for mental fortitude in regard to the highs and lows in mission success and failure, and how you and the guys you worked with dealt with poor leadership?
Well, that's a pretty complex question.
Yeah.
And you could put that into some bite-sized bits. I think the key, Patton said something about a good plan, executed now is better than a perfect plan executed too late. We like to work on a deliberate attacks when I was there, but we also understood you might have to have one that was, immediate act that you had no choice to. So we trained to have our mentality set up to where we were prepared to respond and try not to be, surprised, flat-footed. If you train for every eventuality you can think of yourself as a shortstop. There's a guy on first. Is he fast? There's a guy on third. Is he slow or whatever? If the ball comes to me, what's the score? What am I going to do with it? Well, a lot of we'd sit around and we would bullshit after the day and go over different scenarios. I know I used to sit back at night and just think over, well, what would I do if this happened? What should I do if that happened? And I'm quite sure a lot of the other guys might have done something similar. The other part, it was a positive attitude. And we were all, you don't get there unless you're able to focus and move on in spite of what I would consider, adversity. The guys in the unit have to overcome physical pain, tiredness, fatigue and all that. And so part of the overall organization is to respond and to be flexible. The selection process is to find people who could work both as a team and as individuals, standalones. So you'll find a lot. I tell you what, if you wanted to, sometimes we get together and there was a lot of guys that would say a lot. You got to try to listen to see where all these gems of all these diamonds in the rough are coming from, because they were a lot of smart people and they're smarter than the boss a lot of times. So if you don't listen to your troops and in that organization, you have to listen to the troops. And sometimes the troops just respond better than you. And if you know what it's just like giving a mission statement and saying, this is what we are here to do. That's what our mission, our final thing is. We're not saying how to do it. And if the plan breaks down a little bit, you've got to know where you're going and what you're supposed to do when you get there. And I would say that's one of the characteristics of that kind of unit. And I'm sure I didn't answer that question perfectly, but check it over and see what I missed, what part I might have missed.
No, that absolutely nailed it. And that second part was, how would you guys deal with poor leadership inside?
Well, I don't know how to speak to that, because there's some cases, we're in the Army and there's a structure and all that. When I was there at the time, if a guy did not fit, if he wasn't accepted by the people he's working with, then they could kind of vote him out. And that's, as far as I remember, that also pertained to some of the officers.
Wow.
The only place I've ever been where, the group can decide this guy is not going to do it. He can't handle the job. We got to get rid of him. And that might have, I don't remember if anybody did go out that way, but I know that was the story. That's what we were told. And that's the way we believed. I had one guy I know went through selection, assessment, and OTC, got into a squadron. And shortly after that, they said, no, he's just not going to make it. And so he had to leave the unit.
Wow. Mr.
Great
Wade.
guy. And tell you something else. People who don't get through the assessment selection process, when they go to the commander's board, it's a subjective board. And there are people who are probably highly qualified, really great troops, but they just didn't match what that board at that time wanted. So it's not a perfect system, but it's pretty good.
That's that not always looking for quote unquote the best, but the right person.
Well, yeah. I mean, how do you qualify best?
Yeah.
That's pretty hard to do unless you've tested it in the crucible of the actual thing. And I don't know. You try to get what you think is the best, but every group has people who get through, and then at the end they turn out to not be what you thought they were. Or, and I think this is a case too, and I got this from a friend in the Secret Service years ago. He was the head of their training. He says, no matter how hard we try, eventually you get a guy that's a slug. Or there's somebody in there who beat the shrinks and he beat all the rest, and there's something aberrant about this person, and it happens. And you've got people who are great up to meet, they met the goal. The goal was to get into the unit. And then it was like, okay, I made it, I'm fine, but they don't want to keep up that standard. So that happens.
Wow. Yeah. Forgot some of the guys say it, some of the more active duty or recently active duty who just retired, saying you were always in selection even after you pass, because at a moment's notice.
Selection never quits. You're being assessed every day that you're there. And if you quit measuring up, then they're going to have to eliminate you, because they can't depend on you doing your best every day.
Wow.
Oh yeah, we all have ups and downs. We all have the wave of performance, but and it's a tough, fast moving train, and it can wear you down. It can wear you out, and you can get burned out.
Mr. Wade talks about the one guy that stud of a man had done well through everything and passed selection. And I think y'all are on one of the training exercises, and he either messes up with a flashbang and they give him a break on that, and then something ends up happening. Either his gun misfires or he has a negligent discharge, and they finally have to say he's not working out for the group. And
well, we had a hot building. Everybody could be going around with their weapon, in condition one, and their 45s and their holsters, walking up and down the hallway, etc. And they had an officer who was trying to join the unit, and for some reason he took out a pistol in the hallway, and it went off, and a round went between two people in the door to the arms room. We had a guy on guard one night. For some reason, he ended up firing off his shot there, and he was gone before the sun set the next day. It was that simple. You had a responsibility. You had to live up to it, and there were certain things that were unforgivable.
Wow, that's every day. Selection never ends. That's amazing. This one has come up with every vet we have in, well, every interview with every vet, but you especially being in Delta at this point in time. One of the questions was, did you or the unit know anything about possible POWs still being held in Vietnam, and if you were going to be spun up at any time to maybe go in to rescue?
Yeah, that was covered. I thought Ish put that in his book, didn't he?
Yes, sir. He did speak a little bit, as well as Eric Haney.
Yeah, we were spun up on at least one operation, and that's when I was there, and I was part of the planning, and we wanted to send in our own people to survey the target, because I'll tell you what, we don't trust anyone else. Mm. I learned that a long time ago, not to trust a third party or somebody that doesn't have the same goals and the same incentive. And later on, they were saying, "No, nobody there, blah blah blah, no sense of going." But and I don't know the answer. I have personal opinions and thoughts about a POW MIA situation, but that's just personal without anything to back it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I happen to think there were some. I've spoken to some POW MIA families, pilots, and they have a feeling their loved ones were had important information that were either sent further north or maybe even into Russia to help reverse engineer.
For lack of a better term, I figure that the U.S. government did not consider it worth the casualties we would have incurred to go in force to extract those people, because they were scattered and there's no way to get them all at one time. But that's just my thoughts, and I've got other thoughts too. But I was on a POW attempted rescue mission in 1964 by accident. It never made the news because it wasn't a big deal. But we were working on that a lot of times. I went in with the 173rd. We went in trying to get back some Vietnamese prisoners of war, but it failed.
Yeah, that would have been tough reading from it, from Mr. Wade, and what Eric Haney wrote about it, that if y'all went in once, and God forbid if there wasn't a slew of prisoners still alive and able to even move and get out, being how old they would be or malnourished or what have you, that any chance of hitting another compound or what have you would be virtually impossible after that, because they'd be moved. And
Yeah, and if you read reports like there were two prisoner of war recoveries in World War II in the Philippines, Cabutawan and then Los Banos. Some of the prisoners didn't want to get rescued in a sense because they had a garden. They had become focused so much in their day-to-day existence that they didn't want to leave it. They wanted to harvest. They wanted to be there when the tomatoes were ripe, etc. That kind of thing. There's a lot of different aspects of a recovery that people on the outside or people who've never been involved or studied it don't have a clue.
That's amazing. And then, I mean, like you said, going on raids in Vietnam, I can't imagine, you know, what it was like actively in the war still trying to get compatriots back, whether they're American or South Vietnamese, to rescue. That's amazing. And of course, there were the Sante raid, and there were a few other SOG slash JCRC
Right.
combination of works that went on, but I don't think very many were successful. Of course, sadly, Sante was not, but they did at least leave a footprint and let people know and let the prisoners know they were not forgotten about, and they were doing what they could at least.
Well, I feel the same thing about Eagle Claw, as even though it failed on basically on technical grounds. I think the main thing it did is it sent the message to the world that, hey, we're subject to come and get our people if you screw with them. If we decide we can do it, we're going to do it. And for all the problem areas, I think the biggest thing was at Mazira when the guys came back there out of Desert One, that the Brits sent over the cold beer. Yeah. The sign says for the guts to try, you know, and that's the answer right there. We had people. One of my worst experiences was I was one of the guys who had to go on the airplanes when they came back to Wadi, Kenya, and check off the names to see who was there. You know, Wade doesn't remember that, but I do, and I had to check everybody to make sure who we had and who we didn't have. And maybe it was already done somewhere else, but I know I had to do it too. And I did. That was one of my, watching them leave with the tailgate going up on the 130s was bad. That just cut me to the quick. But when they came back and I had to go in and do that, that was devastating in the sense of all that effort, all those people and all that will had been thwarted by breakdown in hardware.
Yeah. I mean, just a complete Murphy's Law freak occurrence that just literally went up in flames.
Murphy and Russ never sleep.
True that. While we're actually talking about Eagle Claw, there's a good question from Joshua on Twitter here. What advice was handed down or were you guys giving out after Eagle Claw, and what changes were made either to operations or training after Eagle Claw?
Well, to the unit, I don't know there were many changes. We might have developed some new equipment because that was an ongoing thing, you know. But the biggest changes were at a higher level. The creation of the Joint Special Operations Command stemmed from all of that. The creation of the Special Operations Command, you know, U.S. Special Operations Command came out of that. To enforce the full scale for major operations like that, we'll have full scale exercises with all participants playing, and you know, simulated distances, etc. Because there's the complexities of these things. You know, individual units don't have those, but when you put them together, you know, that crossword puzzle has got to be put together right. And I think that was the biggest thing that came out of it was. And it may be a lesson not well learned because people change, the history, the memories, they go away. And some people are always trying to cut corners. I mean, when you've got a guy in the White House, some advisor at the White House telling the infantry battalion how many troops he can take to a response, you got a problem. And we have that happening. We have somebody who doesn't know a goddamn thing about the business telling you how many bodies you really need to do your job. The 10th Mountain, when they went to Mogadishu, they were not allowed to take their anti-tank platoon because that was just another aircraft load and they didn't need those people. Well, they didn't know what the mission's going to entail, and the organization went in there without all of its pieces. You know, they didn't have all the leadership, didn't have all the troops that you need for an operation. Everybody doesn't fit in a small niche. They have to do more than one thing, and these people don't understand it.
That is, would you see, or did you have a feeling, Mr. Wade covers it and he didn't think it was going to be possible, even if everything went right? Did you have a feeling when y'all got back and there were murmurs that y'all were thinking about going back into attempt number 2, that would ever get off the ground, no pun intended, that y'all would actually go for that?
Well, I don't think we thought it was going to happen. We started planning with the best of intentions, but the biggest thing that they learned in country was disperse the hostages and move them around. I mean, when they took the hostages in Beirut, they kept moving them around. You know, I remember one of the guys when he got released, he said, "Yeah, I was always happy when they came and got me in a German car because there was more room in the trunk." The Jap cars have small trunks. I mean, that's a joke, but it's not a joke. But the point was that they were moving them around a lot. And so it's pretty hard to organize a response unless you're someplace where you can get actionable intelligence. And that's something that most people don't understand. Yeah, intelligence is great, but something you can really take and respond to immediately is so rare. You know, it's like the Hope Diamond. You just don't find that every day.
Wow, that's amazing. I love hearing you guys share this important history for all of us to take note on. This question's actually come up in the live chat and from one of the viewers or one of the people online. Did in your time, did y'all ever work or do any training with Det A in Berlin?
In the unit, I never did. Later on, when I was working on a different project in a different organization, I visited them just to do a little evaluating and comparing. But there's nothing more to talk about there.
Roger that. Let's see here. Oh, this is a good one. And I don't know, maybe this could be if you've got only one, or maybe this could be in Vietnam or at the unit that you happen to see. But John Grobe was curious, excuse me, who was your best leader and why?
My best leader, operational wise, was a major, I think he made lieutenant colonel named Pappy Lamar.
Oh, yes.
He was our boss at Omega when I got there.
Mm-hmm.
And and I met him in '64 during that prisoner war recovery attempt. And the guy was unconscious. He just drew your loyalty, and you believed him, and you knew he was going to back you up. And I don't know why. I don't know what it was about him. Another one that was like that was Gary Luck at JSOC. You know, I just didn't want to disappoint him. He didn't do anything special, but he had that quality.
Wow. It's amazing hearing about those type of men that can get men like yourself to say they follow them into hell with gasoline underwear. That they must be really some special guys to be able to do that and draw y'all's admiration.
Well, it's just like some of the leaders I they had feet of clay that reached their dang earlobes. You know, as personalities, they had a lot of aberrations in there maybe, but they were competent and they took care of their troops and they understood the mission. So those were the characteristics that I cared about. I really didn't give a damn if he was out there having sex with a bulldog in front of the White House, as long as when we were doing our job, he was doing it right. Well, I'm overstating that, but you know what I'm saying. There's some guys that drank too much. There were some guys who screwed off on their wives, but I can't sit around and be a judge on that and not do my job. I got to focus on my job. And then, yeah, there's some folks who I lost respect for, but that's an individual thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, Wow. Gosh, my throat is messed with me. This is um, this is interesting, and I'm not sure how this one can be answered, but somebody was curious. The name Derek on X was what was the biggest technical advancement that you saw while you were in the unit?
Hmm. Well, I think the biggest technical advancements were, well, we were getting improved night vision equipment and stuff like that, and of course the inclusion and development of the 160th
Mhm.
aviation unit that developed with greater capabilities, as well as the little birds that gave us flexibility to get in and out of places. Uh, the key was not so much technical, although we identified weaknesses that I think in many cases have been overcome by science since then. But there were things we couldn't do and we wanted to do. But I think the breaching information was developments and advances that have been taken to a much higher degree now, but they weren't there then. And our guys put them together. And of course, you got the one in the book that Ish continues to get after me for. And I keep saying, okay, I was the boss, so therefore it's my fault and I can't bitch. But there's a lot more to it than that. And I think he throws a little hyperbole in there at times.
That's very an interesting story, guys. It's in Mr. Wade's book to where he's really laying out how Delta built to where they become the just ultimate standalone unit, shall we say, but having intel sources come in. They're training with the Secret Service, helping them set up their CAT team that helps protect the president. The LAPD, FBI SWAT. I think LAPD too. That's where y'all were doing an exercise.
We were
But
out there
feel
with LAPD and the police, and we worked with the LA, the sheriff's office and the FBI out there during that trip. We worked all those organizations. In fact, it's a little funny, I think a funny story that we were invited to the annual softball tournament between the LA police and the LA Sheriff's Department, and we won.
I
And
bet
they were a little upset, I think. But the reason we won, we were a team, and people apparently, a lot of the guys were able to hold their egos down and work for the team, whereas a lot of those guys at those SWAT teams were kind of cowboys. But most of them were great, but there were a few of them that were kind of out to lunch that kind of made me wonder. In fact, one of them in particular, I found out later, he got fired shortly after that because he was not acceptable.
off the reservation, so to
Yeah,
speak.
right.
Mr. Wade also, and I of course figured or would think that you guys were doing stuff like this, but uh, the Department of Energy exercises to where y'all help set up their response team. I forgot if it was a NEST team.
Nest
Uh,
team,
yeah,
nuclear emergency survey team or support team. I forget exactly what the S stood for. And there was an organization that was on contract also to support that.
I'm blanking who that was, but that was one of the eye-opening parts, and just how involved they were and y'all were with getting on bases, and I guess you could kind of compare it to. I mean, it was a known thing, unlike the supposed Dick Marcinko red
Red
forgot the name.
teaming,
Yeah,
red
the
cell,
red
red cell.
cells that where he was going on sites, but
Yeah.
y'all were doing that and help training security teams for our nuclear sites and
Yeah,
silos and stuff.
we did a lot of different things along that line, and mainly the guys would go off and work on a project and maybe taken away for a bit for that stuff. But some guys were doing things. We came up with some scenarios we wanted to test, and they wouldn't let us because they didn't want that bag. I guess they didn't want to know how vulnerable they were.
Oh God.
There was some involving the White House that we proposed a couple of evaluations, and they were shut down. That no, we don't want to do that. So okay.
I heard about one of the White House ones that the Secret Service were not too fond of even attempting.
Well,
uh,
there's the big thing about the red cell, and I support that concept, and it's nothing more than the same idea of being an infantry platoon sergeant. You're setting up a defensive perimeter, and when you get the thing done and you put everybody where you think you want them, you need to go outside your perimeter and walk around and look at it from the standpoint of the enemy. Because that's when you find the avenue of approach you should have been covering. That's when you find out where the dead spaces are that you can't get from a map and just looking from the inside out. So the same thing with the red cell. You go out there and you look at a problem from the standpoint of the guy trying to exploit it. And I've seen some of those. I saw one of the demonstrations go wrong because of failure to follow a checklist, for example. But generally speaking, the idea was a great one, and what they were going to do would have worked, but it failed and made them look stupid. But in fact, I can laugh now because I think it was Larry Bailey was running it. It was a SEAL team that was doing it, and we were having a conference, and they were going to use a remote controlled vehicle to drive a charge underneath the car. And it didn't work because the batteries died. They didn't put in fresh batteries before the operation. See, so they failed to follow their own checklist.
Wow.
But that's the kind of things that happens. That's where Murphy jumps up and bites you in the ass.
That's using a remote control to get the explosive.
Well, that's just like I got exposed to drones in 1979. And at that time, all that stuff was very closely held. Wow. And it just stayed undercover until all of a sudden Ukraine comes around and the world's full of drones.
I mean, it is a wild world on social media, seeing these groups post, I mean, running down tanks or armored vehicles. And I mean, it's definitely a whole new world. I can only imagine the work that's going in at the unit right now for jamming and anti-drone weaponry or what have you.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure there is. In fact, I was reading in the Army magazine last month or the month before that the Army has created a small subordinate command dedicated to employment and counter drone activity and how to defend ourselves from it. I guess the Marines now have developed some weapon systems that they're using and trying to get out there. So, it's a very, very fertile world to work in, and there's lots of different aspects of it that we may not even think of until it's too late.
I mean, seeing some of those videos, you'd never think in the modern age that an old shotgun would come in handy for shooting drones out of the sky and all that. It's wild. What's
at least 10
on.
years ago, I saw a video of a guy had put a 22 caliber rifle on a drone.
Oh Lord!
And he was flying around shooting at targets with it, And
that's 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing new. It's just applications are going to be expanded because electronics, technology, AI, etc. I mean, I've got scenarios in my head that I don't want to talk out loud because somebody might grab them and use them.
That's terrifying, and I God Almighty, what have we got to look forward to here?
Well, I'll give you an example of that. 9/11, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had sat around and talked about that very thing after operations. They're, drinking a beer and talking about the fact of taking an airliner and flying it into a building and et cetera. The only thing that surprised me is they were able to organize that many aircraft, and then also knowing that at least one more didn't even work. The guy chickened out. So, the only thing that surprised me was that they were able to orchestrate a multifaceted target, a mission with multiple aircraft.
And there y'all are sitting around just, not even thinking this would ever happen, but nailing it on the head like that. That's
and we'd figured it out. Yeah, the best time to do it is right after takeoff with a full fuel load. Therefore, you've got more fuel to spread and all the rest. And when you've got kamikaze mentalities, martyr mentalities, it's impossible to be 100% protective.
Yeah,
they don't care. We have to live in this world. We have to live our lives in this world. And so we are always vulnerable to some extent.
Yeah, and if you got somebody that's willing and quite frankly looking forward to offering themselves and as many other people as they can, as you said, there's not that's pretty daggum hard to defend against.
And see, that's one of the things about training, because uh, it's funny. I was sitting there talking to some guys on a patrol. I was with another patrol in the 173rd, and I was escorting a prisoner out to find a weapons cache, and they were going to escort us out there. And I was talking to these kids. I said, when you meet contact on these trails, the most first thing both sides do, you guys step back. When you do, you raise your weapon. If you don't get it up to your shoulder or tuck it back into you, it's going to start shooting high. And we hadn't gone another 150 meters, and the point met some NBA coming down the trail. There was an exchange of fire. Half a dozen magazines were gone. Nobody's hit. Nobody's hit. And I was talking to a couple of them later, and this one kid, and he said exactly what I'd been telling them. And all of a sudden, I was Mr. Guru. They said, he knows something. He knows something. But that's the kind of thing that happens. So if in training you don't make yourself learn that your automatic response is not to throw it underhanded to second base, but to go home, then you will respond by stepping back and shooting high, maybe. See, that's just like I taught my recon team. If you're firing from the hip, bring it into you, let it suck into you, and keep the weapon shooting low. A ricochet is better than a miss.
Wow, that's stuff you only learn by being on the job and being in the mix. That's geez. Oh, speaking of, this was a question that literally just came in. What was the and with Eagle Claw going on and the heroics getting people back to the doctors and medics and such? Well, how was the medical capabilities of the unit at this point in time with the doctors or either medics or?
Okay, we had an emergency medical team. The leaders was Carl Savory and Arcanol. I can't think of his first name, and they were both orthopedic and I think an emergency room people, and they had put together a medical package. And there were probably some more people involved with that I can't remember, but they had deployed a team that was outfitted to specifically deal with those people.
That is amazing, and I can only imagine if the regular course for a special forces medic is the goat lab and then taking turns at or doing shifts at the local hospital or what have you. I can only imagine what the Delta guys were getting trained at with hospitals or doctors or surgeons or what have you.
Well, I don't know how much beyond that. We did have a medical detachment that was separate within the unit, but the deployable package was one with the doctors and flu. They were part of our on-call group. And in fact, I just had an email exchange with Doc Savory about 2 months ago. He's retired now. He lives around Atlanta somewhere. These were some just superior people. They were really great. And we had a capability that was expanded and exchanged, over the years. It got bigger, and I think it included something under the JSOC arena as opposed to just the Delta arena. But I don't know that for a positive fact. That's just my perception.
I mean, there's just so many, like you said, unforeseen things that you've really got to get your mind to start looking at. The defensive driving courses that were going on, the shooting, the intelligence that guys are getting trained for singleton or information gathering. Mr. Wade did a great story to where, I don't know if y'all were on the way to LA or one of the exercises, but y'all wanted to go in street clothes, and it was to see how many of y'all could go unnoticed with the airport already knowing these men are coming through, see if you can take them out and catch them. And I think all but 2 men made it through undetected. And it's just the stuff like that that's going on that y'all are learning, like drinking out of a fire hose, I can imagine.
Well, yeah, when they first started, for example, guys off duty tended to wear a uniform, whether they realize it or not, the same kind of shirts, the same kind of belt buckles, and stuff like that. So they actually brought in some people to give some classes on dressing success, so to speak. Like when I worked overseas in Europe, I went over there and I bought all local clothing.
Mm.
So I didn't look like an American because Americans are easy to pick out normally.
Oh
The
yeah.
clothes are just cut differently. We wear different. But now it's not so much the same. But there's a look. There's a look that
Mm.
you'll find, and that seemed to work pretty good. But you don't always have that luxury because you don't have the time to prepare. But again, years ago, I'll give you an example. I could go through Heathrow Airport and look around, and I could pick out all the guys on the oil fields that were going to Libya, because in those days we couldn't work. They couldn't go to Libya, so they go to England and change there and go down to Libya to work in the oil fields. They were mostly from South Texas and Louisiana. They all wore blue jeans. They had Western shirts and a big belt buckle, and half of them had cowboy boots. There they are.
Wow.
So it doesn't take a genius to see it. It's just you have to be aware of it. That's all.
Picking up on those patterns and everything. That's really neat. I would have never thought that even somebody could teach that, but much less, getting them to come in to show how y'all to dress down because of the subtle. You're all going to dress alike or wear normal stuff. That's just going to get you picked out as being a non-uniformed member of Delta. That's wild. Very cool.
Yeah, like when I got operational and I had to go get my civilian clothing, my wife, realizing my weaknesses in terms of fashion sense, we went to DC and she bought me one really good suit. And at that time, that was it cost me about $500, and that was you'd look at me in that thing and you'd think I worked for some inside the Beltway for some bandit or something, because it didn't look at all like anybody in the military would wear. And you had some of the guys who had been exchanges with the SAS, and they'd go down and they'd buy clothes downtown in London and things like that. So you tend to do that. You expand your wardrobe, but at the same time, you look to be other than a GI going somewhere.
Wow, that's even in the military. I mean, it's like spy versus spy almost. Y'all trying to stay one step ahead of each other. That's crazy. And speaking of the 22 SAS, how I know at the beginning you already mentioned that they were a great help, but were them and the GSG-9 and the French, I believe GIGN, were they around quite a bit at the onset?
Well, there were some exchanges with the GIGN that I was never involved with. A guy named was Pruteau was their leader. He was the leader of that outfit. And then the SAS, I had some dealings with them. And there was a lot of joint exercises, etc. There was exchanges with the Germans, and they sent over a couple of guys, and we sent over a couple of guys a few times. But there was not nobody. We didn't have anybody else. We had the same kind of organizational relationship that we did with the British. That was almost familial in some ways.
Yeah, it's because aren't y'all pretty much, or weren't y'all pretty much based on the 22 SAS layout?
The original model was based on a similar model, on a patrol of a certain number of men,
squadrons and
4-man and squad. Well, we used squadrons was kind of a cover thing to both, probably to them, as well as to the fact that in the Army, only aviation and cavalry have squadrons.
Wow, that is very cool. There was, I think I had somebody had asked. Oh, that was what it was. Was from Mr. Wade's book, and I had read it in another book. But Mr. Burr Smith, the legendary Band of Brothers soldier and CIA operative, was he around during your time?
Oh yeah, I got to know him pretty well.
Wow.
In fact, he ended up marrying the widow of another friend of mine who was killed in Laos.
Oh wow, jeez, that's neat, that small community, and how some of y'all actually end up family. I mean, y'all consider yourselves like brothers, but y'all actually
Burr and a guy named Squeak Charette and Johnny Kearns were over there doing something around the Plain of Jars, and when the NVA were coming around through there with tanks, and Kearns went down to look at something, and the tank came around the corner, and he got hit with some fragments and bled out on the way out. But and Burr ended up marrying Johnny's widow, from what I understand.
Wow. We've got one or two more questions, but two involve pictures about people. I've gotten two people just typed in that aren't able to watch, but they're curious about. Did you have any interactions with Walt Shoemate when you were around?
I met Walt Shoemate in 1958 in Germany.
Wow.
He was an E4. He'd gotten busted from SFC for one of his legendary escapades. And I ran across him time and time again till after he retired. And he was kind of one of my mentors in some ways. I used to call him Uncle Walter just to let him know how I felt about him.
That is too good. I've got a...
Walter is probably a guy who was so underappreciated that he would do things that were outstanding, and people would say, well, that's just Walter. He's always doing good stuff like that, or going the extra mile. I just tell you, he was an amazing fella, and a great soldier, and also an outlaw to the very core.
I hope that it's true from all of you guys that his mustache is still at the compound.
I was at a meeting at McKellar's Lodge, and General Garrison was there, and Mel Wick, and a couple other guys, and we were all talking about that mustache, and that the commander at the time did not want us to bring it in because they put it in lucite. And I just said, well, why don't you give it to General Garrison? He can walk in there, nobody's going to stop him, and he can give it to the sergeant major in there, and then they can put it somewhere. And other people may say that's not a true story, but I will swear to that story. And it got in there. I understand now it's in a place of honor, but that's all I know.
That's what I've been hearing. That besides Mr. Cliff, Mr. Billy Wall, and a few others, I think Mel Wick was there when they jumped in with his ashes to the compound.
Yeah, I went there that day, and I got there late. Well, I wasn't one of the guys invited to do it. They went out to Range 19 and jumped them in. And I was out there just watching, and their counterintelligence guy came up alongside my car and said, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And I said, "Don't worry about it. I know who these guys and all that." But that's the way it went. I had to do something else at the time, and I couldn't make it.
Wow, gosh. Well, I mean, just a whole other way to solidify that legendary status of his, being jumped in by Cliff and Mr. Billy and Mel Wick. That's
and Matos, I think, was one of the guys that did that day.
And was asked about Mr. John Caviani being in the unit, and of course Mr. Eldon Bargewell.
Well, I never knew John Caviani. I've never met him.
Wow. Okay.
And of course, I knew Eldon because he had B squadron when I had A squadron.
Mm-hmm. And we're at that point in time, when he took command of the squadron, what rank was he at that point in time? Is there a gosh almighty specific billeted rank for a commander of a squadron?
I think he can be lieutenant colonel now.
Wow. I believe I've got, yes, here we go. Here's B squadron with Mr. Eldon and Mike Vining for everybody. And those are correct names for everybody that was wondering. We've figured out at least 90% of them are correct.
In fact, I got an email from Rudy Rodriguez recently. If you would send me those pictures, I don't have those.
Yes, sir. I can do that, and I'll send
Jerry
you.
Boykin still had the squadron, and Eldon was a troop commander.
There's Mr. Jerry right here. There's Mr. Eldon.
Right.
Yeah. We've got Steve Hoffman, a CCN vet. Yeah. We're not sure about this, but here's the other photo that is A squadron. I think Mr. Mo has figured that this is before the Iran raid and before his time.
Well, it was before my time. It might have been afterwards, but it was before my time.
There's Phil Hansen and Mark Gentry.
Yeah.
I'm I'm not good with faces, of course, as people get a
Okay.
little older.
Yeah, and I like Matos is in the far top left as you see it right now. Looking at it, that's Matos. The viewers left,
Okay.
and God, there's a guy between Gentry and Mike Waite. And right now, I can't think of his name. He was one of the senior troops team leaders, and oh my God, I can't remember all those names now. Oh, there's Van Borkelo. Damn, the guy that's see Eddie Bagarin. That's Eddie. Okay, go up and to the right. Go up and one more. That's Van Borkelo, a big Viking-looking guy. With his mustache, he looked like the Minnesota Viking.
Wow. It's these early photos, I wish we could get all the names like that other one. These early group photos are just outstanding. I mean, what
Yeah.
a collection of warriors y'all
But now,
got here.
if you take a look at this photograph, and you were to look at a SEAL team, they would
Huh.
look physically much different as a group.
I've got I don't have it to where I can pull it up, but I do have an early dev group photo, and yes, don't look very much alike at all. And that's pretty neat how, well, nowadays everybody looks like they're, UFC Viking warriors with the
Well, I know
tattoos and
everybody's big and buff, but our guys at our time, we were in great condition, but we were more like, what can you do tactically as opposed to how good you look.
yeah, I mean, you guys had come from the Vietnam era where y'all are running through the jungle humping weight and not and carrying 20 rounds of 20 mag rounds
Well,
of CAR 15 ammunition and not like 10 mags like they are in the desert.
I came back from Vietnam after a TDY, and you don't run when you're on operations like that. And I hadn't taken PT as such for 6 months, and I went out and got rest and recuperated for 3 or 4 days, and then the sergeant major said, "Come back in, and we'll put you to work." And I came back in on a Thursday, and he told me I was going to scuba school on Monday.
Oh,
I got to go get my physical and go to the chamber that weekend. And so, that almost killed me. That was a tough physical school, but I was strong, but I wasn't in physical condition to take that kind of training. Today we're lucky. Most of the time, guys go into the combat diver course, they go to pre-scuba, and guys going to Ranger school, go to Ranger indoctrination program if they're with the battalions, and guys go out there and train to go to these places. And a lot of times we didn't do that. We just, oh, your name came up. It's time to go. Go out there and bite the bullet.
well, I mean, everybody speaking from y'all's time and even the few current or later generation or this generation, they still say combat diver school or dive school, SF dive school is probably the hardest school they've ever done.
That was the most physically demanding course other than the Delta selection program.
Wow.
I mean, for me.
Well, I mean, for you, I can imagine it is for a lot of other people, considering how rawhide you were and are.
I don't know. When I came to Delta, I came out of an office job at TRADOC, and so I had to buff up or work up to get there. But I got prepared for that. I'll give myself credit for that. I went out and trained my ass off for that one.
Shake the rust off a little bit.
Well, you put on your rucksack and you walk and you march and you run and but I will say this, I was always one who at least tried to maintain the ability to pass the PT test with 100%. Maybe not always, but normally.
Wow. Thought that would be a great photo. Was it? I labeled this Iraq. Is this in Iraq or was it?
Yeah, that's in Baghdad at our building downtown there in Baghdad.
Lovely AK. And is that the M4 or is that?
Yeah, that's an M4. It's an M4.
Wow, that's what were you contracting at that point in time?
Yeah, I guess you could say I was the chief of staff for the vice president for DynCorp, and I had oversight of the security teams and security programs we had there at the time. So I was traveling, and we traveled around in town And then we travel around the country too, as well, to go out and visit the various sites and then inspect the different teams and stuff.
Man, that's a pretty big responsibility and a big job right there.
Well, it was
The
interesting.
Diet Corps.
I'll give it that. I stayed busy, long days. That's when I realized I was tired of doing the 18, 20-hour days.
Oh, this one comes up, and I actually did have a photo I was going to bring up to see if you might have known this gentleman, but one of the viewers is curious about where'd it go? Any black Delta Force members? Were there any during your time?
Yeah. In fact, Earl Atkinson came in the unit and as an officer. He was an officer and came in while I was there. I thought the world of him. We didn't have that many. My son, my middle boy, was going through the Special Forces Assessment and Selection Program in the late 80s. And he told me that one of his buddies in the course he was with was a black guy that said that the story on the street was that Special Forces and Special Operations units was not for black soldiers. They should go airborne, but they shouldn't go for Special Forces. So we had a very low percentages of tryouts. And I don't think we had many tried out for Delta either. Yeah, that's right there. Yeah.
According to this, he is the first black Special Forces soldier to pass selection assessment for the OTC. Wow.
He was the first officer.
Okay. Wow.
Now, we had other guys. If you go back and look at the pictures, we had some other guys in there that were black as well. And of course, communications, we had some guys in the comm that were black and other support.
Amos Howard, I believe, was one.
Yeah.
Could be. Yeah. I remember seeing him up there. Right. Wow. Yeah. I get asked that a lot, and especially also with SOG. And I was like, oh, God almighty, yes. There were a lot of great black SOG men.
Well, when I was in Omega, I can only remember two guys, Spruill and, God, I can't think of his name now. The big, they called him Mang because his team was Chams. Mang Lewis. And they were both black recon men. Wow. And there weren't many that tried out for it, though. Well, we didn't have a lot of them in Special Forces. They just didn't go to the Special Forces track. That's all. Mm-hmm. Why, I don't know, or maybe they just didn't feel, welcome. And I can understand that too. See, I go back to the 50s in the Army.
Oh yeah, guys, if y'all are wanting to get very deep here in just a minute, I might not have it in there yet. I think I do, but his first visit with us is almost 3 hours. And it covers from birth to right now, basically, or when we were talking a year ago. All right, wow, we're already at 1:20. We're set on an hour, thinking we weren't even gonna make it that long. There is one question right here. I think it would be an interesting to close out with. Don't think I've skipped any. But did Wade speaks about this, I believe. Did a squadron deploy for the 1984 LA Olympics?
I don't know. I was not there. I know they had some people who did some prep work. Mm. I wouldn't be surprised, but I was gone to Panama. I had left the unit and I was in school in Panama at the time, so I had no direct contact with the unit whatsoever.
Wow.
I was down to the School of the Americas going to their the Command and General Staff course in Spanish, which I didn't speak.
I said that was the last question, but what you just said gets one more. What's it like when you leave the unit? Are you kind of welcome back, or are you what's that like when you officially part ways with Delta?
Well, I was always welcome, I thought, when I got back there. And in fact, when I got inducted into the Special Forces Regiment as a distinguished member, I didn't notify them, and they got pissed off that I didn't notify them, and they sent a guy over to be my escort while I was there.
Wow.
I didn't. Yeah. I was trying to maintain that pseudo secret aspect of it, and and found out that they were happy about it. And so I got to go over there and meet I went back to a couple of reunions and have had, we're all welcome when we go back for that.
That's awesome. You hear about all these guys either doing podcasts or writing books and making, well, not any Delta guys. I should amend that. Some of the SEAL guys, and they're PNG'd from the command or showing up places and all of that. And I was just curious, not that you would be PNG, but
I understand that Eric Haney was not welcome back after he rode inside the Delta Force. And I understand a couple other guys that did some stuff that they weren't really welcome back, but I don't know about the roster of those who are not welcome at the gate. Well, but it's a very, today to this date, it's still, you got to go through different levels of entry and all the rest. There's no blanket. Here I am, let me in. You got to get checked out and all the rest to go in there.
Wow. I think
it's not the same. It's not the same unit in many ways because it's expanded and improved, and the technical aspects. It's kept up with the times. Put it that way. So there's still the basic core is the individual operator. That's what makes it all work or not work.
Now, with the keeping up with the times, does that mean non-operator role? Do they have more women in the unit doing support staff roles? Probably.
Well, we had women in the support role when I was there. In fact, one of them in personnel she ended up marrying one of the sergeant majors, and she's just was an incredible person as a soldier and as a person, as an individual. There's other things going on that I don't know the real details of, and I just do not get into it. But I know women are participants within that organization.
Wow. Excellent. I've seen some recent podcasts about cultural, CST teams or something like that. And
your cultural support teams are out there, and they had, by virtue of the society they're in, they had to have women to gain access to the local women. And if you didn't have somebody who could talk to the local women, what's the story? So, I mean, my personal view is that we should have women at least at the group level in every special forces group, because you've got missions that call for the female personality, the woman, because they can go or the man can't go. They can talk to the people. And so much depends on the part of the world. And there's so much. Special forces is still small enough that they should be able to massage themselves to create positions for people who are qualified to do a lot of different jobs. That's just me talking. I'm not, there's a lot of guys out there and say, we don't know goddamn women in this unit. And it's just like in the infantry. I don't believe there's a place for women in a rifle squad. I don't believe there's a place for women in a rifle platoon or a company, infantry company. I can see places for women all the way up, though, from battalion up, but that's just me.
I'm agreeing with you on that as well. It's just the overall mechanics of it, the feelings of going into combat, and caring for a woman, men thinking they need to protect, just a whole bunch of stuff. I would feel like the SF route, like you said, specialty jobs.
I was a company commander at TRADOC, of the headquarters company of TRADOC in Fort Monroe, when they dissolved the Women's Army Corps, when they deactivated the Women's Army Corps. So I had to integrate the barracks with the men and women.
Wow.
So I was one of those guys who had a chance to play with that mix and try to sort it out on a day-to-day basis. There was nothing operational there. It was strictly administrative base and support activities, but they were still two sexes in the same buildings. And I guess I had a more liberal attitude towards this and a need to be more flexible than a lot of guys. I mean, there were a lot of people above me that they wanted to hang me when I was supporting my XO going to flight school because she was a woman. We don't need no goddamn women flying helicopters in my army, that type of thing.
Wow.
Look who we got in Congress today.
I mean, that's the times are changing, and that must have been a wild time when WAC dissolve, so to speak, and
Yeah.
it was full on integration with
Right.
the women in the battle into the army.
Well,
That's
see, I was married twice. I was married twice, and both the women I married were smarter than me. They were both common sense and strong women, and they went around the world and did things like many women have never done.
mhm.
And so maybe that's how I was cultured by them. Put it that way.
Strong women, they've got their places everywhere, but like you said, not with the infantry. But women, it's changing. I mean, that podcast where I saw the CST teams, it looks like they're doing some pretty interesting stuff and knocking around with some of the Delta guys, helping them out on certain
Absolutely,
targets.
there's a place for these women, and I've met a couple of them, and
Oh,
individually they were impressive as hell. They
wow.
were intelligent, they had skills, they were physically capable, but they were not going to be going out there and carrying around 120 pounds of crap, climbing a mountain day in day out without breaking down. And the men break down, but women break down faster, and they
Oh
break
yeah.
down, and there's a Marine uh, Marine captain. Oh God, it must have been again 8 or 9 years ago, who wrote a scathing article about the fact that yes, she could do things some of the time, but she just wasn't able to do it the way that she would like, or couldn't keep it up.
Yeah, that's perfectly said, and I won't even go on anymore because I'll liable to dig my hole trying to say something intelligent.
Well, I think I've been drained out. I don't think I have much else unless somebody's got a
We're,
specific question. I don't
no,
think much I can add.
we're good here. That's more that it's perfect as it could have been. Is there anything else you'd I'd like to say goodbye with, or shall we just go ahead and call it a day with the success we've had so far?
Well, I think that's probably the best answer right now. I could talk again someday, but unless they've got fresh earth to till, I don't know that it'd be worth much time.
I'll after this, we've had a lot of viewers. We got 35 in here actively watching and commenting. I'll keep an eye on the comments, and if people get enough up to where we can do something again like this with specific questions that you can help us out with, we'll keep an eye on it. But other than that, we've covered a lot of ground today, and we thank you for sitting around with us and sharing your important history for an hour and a half.
Well, it's been my pleasure in a way. It gives me a chance to act like I'm a real person again.
Well, we appreciate you spending time with us, and absolutely wonderful. And I'll keep you abreast of how everything's going with this, and if we get any good feedback and questions coming in.
Okay, I'm just gonna sit here and watch it snow.
I'm glad my snow time is over with. Those 2 weeks we had only 6 inches. I almost lost my mind. I couldn't do it. I don't see how y'all do it.
Well, Texoma didn't get any. This area didn't get any snow except for Sherman and Denison, and we're getting lake effect snow. It's just coming across the lake and coming right across our house. Not heavy.
Oh,
It's just a little bit of flurries and a pretty windy, but it's pretty outside.
pretty, but pretty daggum cold as well.
Oh yeah.
All righty, sir. I thank you, and we will see you later.
Okay.